All right. Let's jump right into a pretty big development coming out of Australia.
Yeah.
Um, on December 10th, 2024, they enacted this significant new privacy law.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that companies that are doing business in Australia
Mm,
really need to be aware of.
for sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's interesting about this law is it's not like a total reboot of everything.
Right.
It's more like an expansion of existing legislation.
Yeah, it builds on what was already there, but introduces some really crucial changes,
Exactly.
particularly when we're talking about protecting kids online
Yeah.
and really cracking down on some of these like harmful practices that we're seeing more and more, doxing and things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to kind of unpack today.
Yeah.
We want to break down like the key points
Yeah.
of this new law
Mm-hmm.
so you can understand what it means for your business. But
Right.
before we get too far into it,
Yeah.
got to throw out the disclaimer.
Yeah, of course.
This is not legal advice.
This is for informational purposes.
Yeah, we're just providing some information.
Mm-hmm.
If you need like real specific guidance on
Yeah.
this, you definitely need to reach out to your legal department or
Sure.
compliance officers.
Absolutely. Think of this as your like need to know briefing on the new Australian privacy landscape.
I love that need to know briefing.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. Uh, this new law, it amends the existing Privacy Act of 1988.
Mm-hmm.
It's bringing in some stronger protections for like personal information.
Yeah, and one of the most talked about changes with this is the criminalization of doxing,
Yeah.
which is
I mean,
a huge deal.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Doxing, for anybody who doesn't know, is the malicious act of publicly revealing somebody's private information online
Right.
with the intent to cause harm.
Right. And it's a serious offense now in Australia.
Yeah, think of it like, posting someone's home address online
Yeah.
to encourage people to harass them.
Right. Trying to incite that kind of behavior.
Yeah, not cool.
Not cool at all.
And under this new law, that could land you in jail
Mm-hmm.
for up to 6 years.
Yeah, that's right. And if the doxing is targeted at someone based on protected characteristics,
Mhm.
like race, religion, sexual orientation,
Okay.
the penalties are even more severe,
Yeah.
up to 7 years imprisonment.
Wow. So they're really not messing around here.
No, they're taking this very seriously.
It's clear that Australia is taking online harassment very seriously.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears for a second and talk about
Yep.
another really important area that this law addresses,
Mm-hmm.
protecting children online.
Yes, this is where the mandatory children's online privacy code
Yeah.
comes into play, and this code sets out strict rules for how companies handle children's data online.
Okay.
It's all about safeguarding their privacy in the digital world.
Makes sense. So
Yeah.
which companies need to be extra careful
Yeah.
about complying with this new code?
So this applies to social media platforms, online services, and any internet service that's deemed likely to be accessed by children. And the Information Commissioner has the power to develop and publish guidelines to help companies figure out
Okay.
whether their services fall under this category.
Interesting. So there's some flexibility there,
Right.
but also like a very clear intention to protect kids.
Yeah, they're trying to cast a wide net and protect as many children as possible.
Exactly.
Uh-oh.
Make the online world a safer place for kids by ensuring that their data is handled responsibly and ethically.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about, the teeth of this law.
Okay.
The source material mentions increased penalties
Mm-hmm.
for privacy breaches. What's the big picture there?
Well, the new law introduces much heftier penalties for companies that fail to protect personal information.
Okay.
They're using a concept called adjusted turnover to calculate these penalties, meaning larger companies with deeper pockets are going to face more substantial fines.
So it's not just a slap on the wrist.
No.
These penalties are meant to actually hurt.
It's about making data protection a top priority.
Yeah, deter companies from being careless with data.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we talked about cracking down on doxing, prioritizing children's online privacy,
Yes.
and these increased penalties for data breaches.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the big highlights, but there's more to unpack.
Yeah, there is.
What else should our listener know about this new Australian privacy landscape?
Well,
Okay, so we've kind of covered some of the main points.
yeah, big ticket items.
But let's dig a little bit deeper here.
Right.
For starters, the law gives the Information Commissioner some pretty serious new powers.
Oh, yeah, they really beefed up their toolkit.
What does that mean?
Well, one of the key changes is this ability to conduct these public inquiries into privacy issues.
Public inquiries. So it's
Yeah.
not just about like reacting to complaints that come in.
Right.
It's about proactively like looking into potential problems.
Exactly. Getting ahead of the curve, trying to identify areas where, privacy might be at risk. And then they can make recommendations to improve data protection practices, like across the board.
Interesting. So they're kind of like a privacy watchdog,
Yeah.
just making sure everybody's on the up and up,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, making sure everyone's playing by the rules and to make sure that those rules have some weight behind them.
Right.
The law also clarifies how penalties for privacy breaches can be enforced.
Okay, right. We talked about the penalties before.
Yeah.
But can you break it down a little bit? How exactly can the Information Commissioner hold companies accountable?
Sure. So they have a couple of tools at their disposal.
Okay.
For less serious breaches, they can issue what are called infringement notices,
Okay.
which are basically like on-the-spot fines.
So it's like a speeding ticket for bad data handling practices.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But for more serious or systemic violations, they can issue what are known as compliance notices. These are more formal directives that actually require the company to take specific steps to fix whatever problem has been identified.
Okay, so it's a graduated system.
Yeah.
Like minor infractions, you get a fine.
Right.
Bigger issues, you got to take some more comprehensive action.
Exactly. And it's all about ensuring that companies take data protection seriously and implement, effective safeguards.
Now, let's go back to children's online privacy for a minute.
Sure.
We mentioned the mandatory Children's Online Privacy Code.
Right.
But the source material says that the commissioner has 24 months to actually develop and register it. Why so long?
Well, developing a really comprehensive code like this takes time.
Oh.
And it takes careful consideration. The commissioner needs to consult with a wide range of stakeholders, including, importantly, children themselves.
Wow. So they're getting input from the kids?
Yeah, which is fantastic.
That's amazing.
They're also talking to organizations that focus on children's welfare industry experts, other relevant government agencies.
So they're really trying to make sure they get this right.
They're really taking a comprehensive approach
Okay.
to ensure that the code is robust and effective.
Now, we can't talk about privacy without mentioning data breaches.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's a reality in today's world.
Yeah, it happens.
What does this new law say about handling those situations?
So one key aspect is the introduction of a more formal process for notifying affected individuals and the authorities when an eligible data breach occurs.
Okay.
This is all about transparency and accountability.
So it's not just about fixing the problem and keeping it quiet.
Right.
You got to be upfront with people about what happened.
You got to let people know what happened and what steps you're taking to mitigate the damage.
Okay, so that notification process, what does it have to include?
Well, it needs to include specific details about the nature of the breach, the type of information involved, and guidance for those affected individuals on how to protect themselves.
So it's about empowering people to kind of take control of their own data.
Exactly.
And minimize the potential fallout.
Yeah, and it helps build trust.
Okay.
By demonstrating that commitment to transparency and, responsible data handling.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on something that's kind of fascinating.
Okay.
And maybe a little bit unsettling.
All right.
The source material mentions that the Information Commissioner has the power to monitor compliance with provisions related to pardons.
Yes.
And spent convictions. Could you shed some light on that?
Sure. So this relates to a really complex area of criminal justice and rehabilitation. When someone receives a pardon or their conviction becomes what's called spent after a certain period of time, they're generally not required to disclose that information.
So it's about giving people a second chance.
Right. Allowing them to move on with their lives without being haunted by their past. And the commissioner's monitoring role is to ensure that this information isn't being improperly accessed or used, protecting individuals' privacy and their right to rehabilitation.
So it's about finding that balance.
It is.
Between protecting privacy and making sure that information is used responsibly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This whole law is about striking that balance, empowering individuals while holding companies accountable for protecting their data.
Well, so we've covered a ton of ground here, but there's one more piece of this new privacy puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
That we got to talk about.
Okay.
It's the introduction of a statutory tort for serious invasions of privacy.
This is a big one.
What is that?
So in legal terms, a tort is a civil wrong that allows someone to sue for damages.
Okay, so this means individuals in Australia can now take legal action if their privacy is seriously violated.
Right.
Even if a specific law hasn't been broken.
Exactly. It recognizes that privacy itself is
Oh.
a right that deserves legal protection.
So how does this new tort work? What are the key elements here?
So first, the invasion of privacy has to be intentional or reckless.
Okay.
Can't be accidental. Second, a reasonable person would have expected privacy in those circumstances.
No.
And third, the invasion must be serious.
That seems a little bit subjective.
Yeah.
How do they define that?
Well, the courts will look at factors like the type of information involved,
Okay.
the sensitivity of the situation, and the potential harm caused.
Okay.
For example, disclosing someone's medical records without their consent would likely be considered a serious invasion of privacy.
Got it. So what happens if someone wins a lawsuit under this new tort? What kind of remedies are we talking about?
Well, the court has a few options. They can award damages to compensate the person for any harm suffered.
Right.
They can also issue injunctions to prevent further invasions of privacy.
Hmm.
And in some cases, they might even order the defendant to apologize or publish a correction.
Wow. So this new tort really gives some teeth to this whole right to privacy thing.
It does. It sends a clear message that privacy matters
Okay.
and that serious violations won't be tolerated.
So we talked about doxing. We talked about children's data, increased penalties.
Yeah.
And even this new tort for privacy invasions. It's a lot.
It's a lot to take in.
Before we wrap up, are there any other, crucial takeaways that our listeners should really keep in mind?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that this new law represents a major shift in how Australia protects privacy.
Yeah.
It's not just about compliance anymore.
Right.
It's about adopting a privacy-first mindset in everything you do.
So it's about, baking privacy into your business practices.
Exactly.
From product development to marketing to customer service.
It's about making data protection a core part of your company culture.
Well said. I think we've accomplished our mission today.
I think so too.
We unpacked the key elements of this new Australian privacy law.
Yeah.
And hopefully given our listeners the knowledge they need to at least start navigating this new landscape.
Definitely.
Huge reminder, though, this was just a high-level overview.
Absolutely.
If you need specific legal guidance,
Please.
please consult with your legal department or compliance officers.
Don't rely on a podcast for legal advice.
But with that said, I hope this deep dive has been insightful
Yeah.
and maybe even sparked some interesting conversations.
Definitely.
It's a really complex issue, but it's one that deserves our attention. So thanks for joining us on the deep dive,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll catch you next time.